and that item that he contaminates in the certain levels, how far could that contaminate? What, person number one could contaminate person number two. If but person number two is limited what he has the power to contaminate, because person number two is called a Rishon L'Tumah, a first. He's not the Av, he's not the dad, he's not the source, or he's not someone who came in contact with a dead body. So if someone's a Rishon, the Gemara says, has the ability to contaminate food, drink, does not have a power to contaminate a person or utensil. There's all different laws when a person becomes contaminated. And we said that there's also utensils. There are certain utensils that the Torah identifies that have the ability to receive contamination. Earthenware utensil, metal utensil, wooden utensil, leather utensil. These are some of the utensils that could receive contamination. And the Gemara says that, also we said yesterday that a earthenware utensil is unique, that once it receives contamination, and unlike metal or other utensils, you just dip it in the mikveh, and the mikveh will remove its contamination. An earthenware utensil, the only thing you can do with it, you have to break it. If you break it, that will make it pure. That will purify it from its contamination. That's an earthenware utensil. And the Gemara was discussing, why did the rabbis present a status of contamination on glassware? Morning, Ralph.
Morning, Rabbi. Same here.
Why did the rabbis place contamination on glassware? So the Gemara said that the reason why the rabbis did it, the Gemara opened up, was because glassware is similar to earthenware, because glass comes from sand. Because glass comes from sand, the rabbis gave it similar status, that it could receive contamination from something or someone, things that have the power to contaminate. The way it can contaminate utensils, meaning you have to be a certain level of contamination to contaminate a utensil. So we say that glass will receive contamination as well, even though on a Torah level, if glass utensils found in the tent of a dead body, it will not contaminate the glassware. But on a rabbinic level, it does contaminate it. And the Gemara said that we found a situation where the glassware seems to have been treated like metal, meaning to say, it was not listed in the similarities and all the similarities of earthenware. And you just told me that glassware, because people could mix up glassware with earthenware, because glass comes from sand, and therefore we need to contaminate the glassware, same way the Torah contaminates earthenware. The Gemara says, but we found that the metal is not exactly like the earthenware, and the Gemara was questioning that, because it seems that the glassware will become contaminated from the outside, from contact. And we said there's a phenomenon when it comes to earthenware. For earthenware to become contaminated, it becomes contaminated only from within the utensil, which we call the aviro. Good morning, Emmanuel. The air of the utensil, meaning if this is a cup, it has to come, the thing that's contaminated has to enter within the airspace within the utensil. Contact with the back of the utensil will not contaminate an earthenware item. And I was speaking to Rabbi Fishelis today, and maybe I want to mention it when the other members come on to the class. Nathan brought up the question, why is it this phenomenon that earthenware, for it to receive contamination, has to receive its contamination from within the item, only if it enters the airspace within the earthenware, not from contact. However, metal receives its contamination from contact, touching the metal, not from its airspace. And he wanted to say that earthenware is clay. Clay has no real value. You take a piece of clay from the ground, you cut it out from the ground, you make it earthenware. The clay is not so valuable. It's the inside which is able to contain and hold a liquid or hold something. That is its value. So therefore, its contamination comes from what gives it importance that's why it's able to receive its contamination, and that's how it receives its contamination through the inside of the utensil. However, a metal like silver, like gold, the metal, the importance of the metal, it's metal, has value, intrinsic value, like as I said, a silver goblet, a gold goblet, a copper goblet. The metal itself has its importance, and therefore you touch not the inside. You don't need to touch the inside. And the airspace won't do it. The air it's not so significant. It's about the metal itself. When you come in contact with the metal itself, that will contaminate the goblet or that. So now the Gemara, Josh. So the Gemara's question is, and then the Gemara said, we found that the glass is not exactly like the earthenware, because we said it receives its contamination from the outside, not from the inside, not from its airspace, but only through contact. So the Gemara said that since when glass breaks, once the glass breaks, it has the ability to be remelted. So that is similar. Good morning, Nathan. That aspect, that is similar to metal. And therefore, just like metal, you could remelt. Therefore, the rabbis gave it that status of metal, that people shouldn't think. Also, the same thing, if glassware will not become contaminated, so then you would say that perhaps that metalware will not be contaminated, because they're very similar to each other. So in order that there shouldn't be that confusion, the rabbis gave it some status, and the rabbi said that it will also, in order to its contamination will be similar to metal, and that it will receive its contamination through contact. That's what the Gemara said. And then we're up to yesterday, I think we started saying on 16:8:2. The Gemara said the following. The Gemara had a question. Once you're telling me that it has the status of, you told me it has a status of metal in that aspect. So we know there's a phenomenon. Good morning, Emmanuel. We know there's a phenomenon about metal. What do we know about metal? We know that metal, once it receives its contamination, and then you break the metal, breaking of the metal will remove it from being a utensil, and therefore the utensil now becomes purified. It's become pure. It's no longer contaminated. But when you put that utensil back together, the rabbis say that the metal utensil, once it's been, so to speak, melted back together, glued back together, that utensil becomes contaminated, receives its old contamination. And the Gemara is going to discuss in the next page, why were the rabbis strict? Obviously, it was a fence. The rabbis were concerned about something, to say that when you put it back, when you reshape it back, now it goes back to its old contamination. But that phenomenon applies by metal. That metal, when you reshape it, it will become, it'll go back to its contamination. So the Gemara says, the glassware should go back to its old contamination like metal. And yet we say that if you take a glass and then you break it, and then you put it back together, we say it does not go back to its status. The Gemara says, it's Elamata Yazu Tumadishana, it should go back to its old status. Matos like metal. We learned it in Mishnah. Kli matzot, if you have metalware, shuteim, if it's flat metal, shuteim, or mekableim, or whether it's something that could hold something, mekableim tameim. Both flatware or something that could hold something, they contract contamination. Meaning to say, if it's a utensil that's flat utensil, flat metal, or something that's like has that you could hold something in it, both could receive contamination. Tameim, however, nishbaru, if they get broken, then taharu. Now they become pure. Once they become broken and become pure, now if truma touches it, it will not invalidate or contaminate the truma. However, if you went ahead and subsequently, after it became contaminated, and then you broke it, and then you remade a utensil from this metal, it goes back to its old level of contamination. However, but when it comes to glassware, we said the following. In the Mishnayot called Kelim, there's a tractate called Kelim, utensils, and it says the following: Kli eitz, if you have utensils made from wood, or Kli or utensils made from leather, a leather utensil, Kli etzem, or boneware, Kli zechuchit, or whether it's glassware, shutehem tahurim. By the way, when it comes stone is not listed because stone is not mikabel contamination. Something is made out of stone, make a utensil out of stone, it's not able, even rabbinically, the rabbis never, marble is stone, and it's from the stone family, they will not receive contamination. But if it's boneware made from the bones of the animal, or leather of the animal, or if it's a glassware, shutehem tahorim. So it's interesting, if it's flat wood, or flat boneware, or flat glass, let's say a glass, it would seem like a flat plate, that's what it would seem like, flat, shutehem tahorim. If it's flat, it will not receive contamination. Now interesting to note that there's something called receiving contamination. Then there's something called an item that requires, when you buy from a non-Jew, dipping in the mikveh, right? When you buy, if you go ahead and you buy a pair of glasses, Pesach is coming, and people want to buy new, let's say you want to buy new glasses for drinking on Pesach, right? Or you want to buy, right? So the law is, if you're going to go buy some sort of metal cup, you want to buy some metal cups, metal silverware, you want to buy new silverware, you have to dip it in the mikveh, right? You have to dip the items in the mikveh. Now, those items that you have to dip in the mikveh are not connected to the laws of whether they have the ability to receive contamination. Because let's give an example. We said yesterday of earthenware. Earthenware, china, right? Let's say china, if it's not glazed, if it's glazed china is discussion. I think many dip glazed china in the mikveh, but they don't say a bracha because of the glaze, that's on the china that is from glass. And then we know glass requires mikveh. Earthenware does not require mikveh. So the question is, some might say that the glaze on the china is insignificant. It's not really keeping the thing together. It's not really making the utensil, usable. Without that glaze, you could use it, but it will do its purpose. So some say you don't need to dip china in a mikveh, but many, you have to look up what's the, the different opinions. Some say you do, but without a bracha. But nevertheless, so we see china. We see you have an earthenware. The earthenware vessel. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Rabbi.
When an earthenware vessel has this phenomenon that it can become contaminated on a Torah level, meaning if it's in the tent of a dead body, it becomes contaminated. Morning. But an earthenware vessel does not need, if you buy it from a Gentile, you do not need to dip it in the mikveh. So we spoke about that, Mark, and also a wooden utensil has the same phenomenon. Wood is one of the things listed in the Pasha Shmini as one of the items that could receive contamination from those dead animals. But nevertheless, if you buy a wooden utensil does not require mikveh. Okay. Now Mark and Nathan and Mark has joined. Maybe I'll something that you both were asking. Nathan asked yesterday. Nathan, you remember the question that you asked yesterday about klicheres? Remember you asked about earthenware and metal. Maybe wait for Nathan to come in. Maybe do it in person or do it on the screen. Maybe wait a little later when you come in, if you're coming in. So we'll address that point. So the Gemara says the following. The Gemara says, since you're comparing glassware to metal as well, so the Gemara has a question. We know by metal that if you break the metal and then you put it back together, the old contamination comes back. But when it comes to glass, we said glassware, we said we made a distinction between glass that's flat and glass that is able to hold something. Similarly, we made that same distinction by wood. That wood that's flat flat utensil made out of wood will not receive contamination from something. A flat glass won't receive, only if it's able to hold something. But if in Nishbaru, if you break this wooden utensil, you break this leather utensil, you break this boneware, or you break the glass to haru, they become purified. I wonder, I'm just thinking out loud, I wonder, we have a minhag that we break a glass by the wedding. We break the glass by the wedding. And the reason for breaking the glass by the wedding is because we don't want to forget about Yerushalayim, remembering the Churban, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So we break a glass at the wedding. So it shows you that your happiness, your simcha, Our happiness is not complete when we don't have the Beit HaMikdash. But maybe there's another idea that you could throw into it. The breaking of the glass, we say that if a glass is contaminated, when you break it, it becomes purified. Perhaps there's also that idea to remember we're breaking the glass, symbolic of any contamination that's here, that the husband or the wife might have, if they anything that's impure, we're breaking it, we're starting fresh, we're becoming pure. Because when a person, but maybe it's symbolic of the idea, when a person gets married, they are forgiven for all their sins, they become purified. So therefore, maybe that's also like just like a glass, when it's broken, becomes purified. Okay, how do you like that, everybody? Sounds like an interesting idea to think about. Okay, now
That's your own shot, no?
that's my own shot. Right, it's an additional. That's not the general shot is that it's because of Zeichel L'Churban. That's the accepted interpretation. But I wonder, unless I heard this idea once upon a time, and maybe it's deep in my conscience somewhere, I don't know. But you like that, Mark? You like the idea?
Very nice, very nice.
Okay. We have to encourage everybody to get married. Remember, it's a big mitzvah. We have to encourage everybody. It's a very important, important people, especially today's day and age, when the world, the outside world, is knocking marriage and doesn't put marriage on where it needs to be, where it needs to be. Okay. So the Gemara continues. But we said if you take this glass, the chazah, the osamem kelim, and then you rebuild, if you put the glass back together, it will not go back to its old contamination. We don't break metal. Metal goes back to its contamination. But when you break glass and you put it back together, it's mekavlim tuma mekanal haba. It only has the ability to receive contamination in the future. Meaning to say, if something that has the power to contaminate comes in contact with this glass, now the glass will become contaminated. But it does not go back automatically to its old contamination. But going back, we don't say it goes back to its contamination. So the Gemara says, but if it's like metal, so it should be like metal in that aspect, that it should go back to its contamination. Because we say metal, once it breaks, it's pure. And if it comes in contact with truma at that point, it does not contaminate the truma. But if it becomes reformed, that metal, you put it back together, we said it will go back to its old contamination without doing anything. It's automatically contaminated again. So why shouldn't glass be like that? So the Gemara says, Tumat kli zchuchit rabbanan. The concept that glass has the ability to receive contamination is rabbinic. And by the way, the same thing is bringing it to a mikveh. When you buy glass from China, I don't know if they're going to be making any more glass made in China. Everything's going to be made in USA now, right? I've got a nice smile from Ralph on that. Yeah, with the tariffs going into place. But it's also rabbinic law to dip your glass goblets, your glass cups in the mikveh. So glass is a rabbinic law that it could track contamination. The Tuma Yeshana, and this concept that once something is broken and you put it back together, meaning something that was contaminated, and you didn't, and there's no mikveh involved, and you put it back together, you didn't dip it in a mikveh. You didn't dip the metal into the mikveh. You dipped the metal into the mikveh, it's no longer contaminated. But you didn't dip it in the mikveh. You broke the metal, and then you reformed it. And now you say it gets back automatically its old contamination. That's a rabbinic law. So it's two rabbinics over here. It's a rabbinic on rabbinic. So the rabbis didn't go that far. Meaning to say, B'tumah the a contamination, which is which is, let's say, metal. Metal receives contamination on a Torah level. The rabbis said that we're going to create this, God bless you, fence
Thank
and
you.
make this gzera by metal. Once it's broken and then it's reformed, we're going to create a rabbinic contamination now on this metal that was broken, morning Nathan, and put back together. However, the Tuma Rabbanan was something which the whole thing is a rabbinic contamination, meaning namely glass. Lo achiti b'Rabbanan tuma. The Rabbanan did not place contamination. They did not place this next level on this whole item that only becomes contaminated rabbinically. Now to create another rabbinic layer on this rabbinic, meaning this glass, and it became contaminated. That whole level of contamination is rabbinic. And now, if the glass is broken and you want to say, and then it's reformed together, now it should get a new rabbinic law should say that the contamination comes back. That far, the rabbis did not want to, like some people say, the shvut, rabbinic. Sometimes a rabbinic on rabbinic, they didn't want to go that far. So the Gemara says, okay, I understand the double lay you didn't want to do. But what about the pshuteim? Good morning, Nathan. The pshuteim, the flat glassware, flat, not a goblet, flat plate of glass, which we say does not receive, the rabbis did not place contamination on a flat, meaning a flat glass. Right, it's not a container, correct. And in contrast to metal, flat metal can become contaminated. A utensil that's a flat metal in a tent of a dead body will become contaminated, but a flat glass will not receive contamination. But why not? Since we said it's similar to metal, and metal, because when you melt it, you can reform it. Flat metal receives contamination. So too, flat glass should also receive contamination. Why didn't the rabbis create, that'll be a one-level fence. We're protecting metal. Let's protect flat metal, which receives contamination on a Torah level. So why shouldn't we say that flat glass should also have the ability to should receive contamination when it's in the tent of a dead body? So the Gemara says the following. Again, the flat glass should receive contamination. The flat glass should receive contamination. The pshute kli matchada, right? And because flat metal does receive contamination on the Torah level. So the Gemara says of the rabbis were concerned because you know what? There's something called a chumrah de atele de kula. Sometimes there's a concern. You might be strict in this area, but you might come to be lenient and lead to a leniency in another area. Meaning to say, if we say that the flat glass, if we say that the flat glass would receive contamination, what people will say is that if flat glass comes in contact with truma, it will invalidate the truma, and you would have to burn the truma, which is the regular protocol if something comes in contact with metal. If, let's say, truma comes in contact with metal that was contaminated, you burn the truma. But that's because metal has the power on a Torah level to contaminate the truma. But glass does not have that right. And being it doesn't have a power on Torah level, the rabbis did not say in that type of case, if glass would come in contact with, let's say glass comes in contact with truma. Let's say glass that's a container. Okay, we are on page 16A, 16A2, towards the bottom, in the right column. So the rabbis were concerned that if we go ahead and we treat glassware, flat glassware, like we treat flat glass, people go ahead and burn. If that flat glassware comes in contact with truma, if you would say that it receives contamination, then it means if it will contaminate the truma, and people will say you would burn the truma, just like when flat metal that was contaminated touches truma, you would burn the truma. But it's not true. You would not be allowed to burn the truma when a glass that's tamei that comes in contact with truma you don't burn the truma. But that whole contamination is rabbinic. On a Torah level, you don't have a right to burn that truma. Even if it's not I want not about the sheni. I don't know if we have to get into the sheni. I'm saying a sheni has the power, like you said, that's true. A sheni could invalidate truma and make a truma that you have to burn the truma. That is true. But here, but right. But this glassware, let's say the glassware that's a container, which the rabbis actually said that it becomes contaminated, right? The glass, what? That's a vessel that holds something. But if that vessel holds it comes in contact with truma, the truma will not be burnt. The truma will be invalid, and what say? Because the whole contamination is rabbinic, and on a Torah level, this truma is perfectly pure. So perfectly pure truma, which we call perfectly clean tahar truma, you have no right to burn. So the rabbis didn't say to burn, even though the rabbis placed a rabbinic contamination on the glass, but they didn't go so far to say, and if we're going to go all the way, you can actually burn truma. So how do people not make that mistake? You know, people don't make. So the rabbi said, "Avdira banan hekera." They made a heker. They made some sort of recognition, like by a husband and a wife. When she said nida, when they eat, they do something. They put something on the table to make a recognition to remember where you are, what status you are. So here, the Rabbanan made a recognition by going ahead and saying we're not gonna go all the way. We're not going to contaminate flat glassware. We're only going to contaminate. We're only going to say that a container that's glass has the ability to receive contamination, and people are going to say, "What's going on? Why is this glass? You're telling me it's similar to metal in certain senses. It receives contamination from its outside, and yet from contact, like metal, and yet it's not exactly like metal, because flat metal or container metal receives contamination, and flat glass doesn't receive contamination." So people will say, why? Why is the flat? They're right there. Metal, both the flat metal and container metals, they're right there. But and you burn the truma. So people say, hey, why isn't this glass? Right? Why is it in the same category? Why is it flat glass? It's not. You say it's not contaminated. It doesn't receive contamination. Because you know why? Because it's rabbinic, and we don't want you to come to less that you come to be burned truma when it comes to contact with glass that's actually a container. If truma comes in contact with glass that was contaminated, which is a container, in order to make sure you're not going to burn that truma, we did not make equal the flat glass. Yes, was that correct? Yes.
So
One.
don't make flat glass
Have the ability of it becoming contaminated.
so that you won't confuse and might burn the truma rather than store the truma.
Store it, leave it and wait, let it rot, and then dispose of it.
You know what? Flat glass doesn't attract truma. I think the same is true of flat metal. Why aren't they worried about the mistake in the opposite direction?
Right. Okay. So, the fact that at least they treated the flat glass, they treated the container. Right, metal's the right. He's saying so. The concern should be flat metal's the right. So let them make a contamination on flat glass because of flat metal. That's Nathan's question.
You might come to make a mistake with flat metal because flat glass doesn't.
Right, so therefore, the point of your question is, therefore, they could put contamination on flat glass, you shouldn't make that mistake. That's what, in essence, what you're asking. But they felt most probably to make a decree to prevent something else, but you're gonna actualize, cause a problem. They felt, let's not make, let's hold back. But Nathan, I spoke with Rabbi Fischelis, Rabbi Feinstein's son-in-law, and I asked him your question that you asked yesterday. Mark, I tried to do my homework. Yes, he remembers his question. What was his question? Mark remembers his question. Question was, remember, Ralph, the question that Nathan asked, Rabbi, we said that this is phenomenon that a kli cheres, an earthenware utensil, receives its contamination only from the air within. If you come in contact with an earthenware, if this would be earthenware, which is not, you come in contact with it, it does not contaminate it. And therefore the Torah says if it has a seal container, earthenware container, is possible God has a seal on top, samid, it's on top, it does not receive contamination, only if it's open, because then it's neat. But you put your finger in, a person who's Anita puts her finger into the airspace inside, you receive not on contact. However, metal receives contamination from contact. Excuse me, why is metal through contact and not through airspace, the metal, but the earthenware? So he said earthenware is made from clay from the ground. Very cheap, the cheapest type of material. The earthenware doesn't have its chashivut, its importance. It's not the actual container item itself. It's that's able to hold something. It's the inside. It's the space inside. Therefore, that's what gives its importance. That its importance, just like a utensil. If something's not a utensil, it does not receive contamination. If you take a utensil and something is broken, it's no longer. If it's broken, it can't receive contamination. It's broken. It's not it has to be a kli. It has to be a utensil to receive contamination. So therefore, metal, which the actual container is important. Silver. The silver is significant. It's not just significant because of what you hold inside. It's the metal. It's silver, metal, gold, copper. The metal is important. Therefore, the contact would make it contaminated. But an earthenware utensil, where its importance is the fact that it's able to hold what's going on inside, is what's of value. The outside has no value. I like it. Thought it sounds very good, Nathan. You like it? Makes it. Okay, thank you. Maybe I heard it somewhere. You never know. I don't want to. Okay. Okay, but you should know, just to end on that point, it says that the machalat. It says the machalat when the idea of marriage is a machilat. People need to know. Good morning, Gary. That a person is forgiven for the sins, like it's a great time of tshuva, of repentance. People are forgiven for their sins. You become a new person, and therefore people have to realize the purity of marriage. Okay, well, we'll be back tomorrow. Now, are people going to be in? You're not going to be here tomorrow. Not going to be here tomorrow. So I'll be here tomorrow and Friday, Beth Hashem. The show must go on. What? No, so Chalamoid, that's the question. If people will be here, we'll talk. If not, maybe we'll do on the Zoom Chalamoid. So Chalamoid, I think we'll talk about doing it on Zoom Chalamoid at the moment. So we'll see. So we'll see if we'll do on Zoom Chalamoid. Meanwhile, we're going to be here live at the Safra Synagogue tomorrow and Friday. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Good to see everybody in this meeting. You keep up everything you're doing. And I expect you're going to be learning about the storm wherever you go. There's so many days of holiday and shit. We're going to be learning good stuff. Good stuff. Have a great day, everybody. And thank you for your involvement. You hear that, Mark? Thank you for coming and strengthening and by the way, I expect you to bring a few more people after Pesach. Some recruitment over the holiday. Over the holiday, I expect Mark, you're going to be doing some recruitment. Yeah, 100%. That's this type of recruiting you do. It's not business. Gary, good to see you. Take care, Asaf, take care, Emmanuel. Good morning, Jack.